My friends, today I want to talk to you about something that is so difficult for many of us. We live in a world that demands instant results. We want everything now. We want success now. We want healing now. We want answers now. But God does not operate on our timeline. He does not follow our schedule. He is not bound by our impatience. He moves according to His perfect will, and His timing is always right. So many of us wrestle with waiting. We pray, and when the answer does not come right away, we begin to doubt. We start questioning God's plan. We wonder if He hears us. We wonder if He cares. We look around and see others getting their blessings, and we ask, Lord, when is my time coming? But I want to tell you today, do not lose heart. Do not be discouraged. God is never late. He is never in a hurry. He is always on time. The Bible tells us in Ecclesiastes 3:01, to everything there is a season, a time for every purpose under heaven. There is a season for waiting. There is a season for growing. And then there is a season for reaping. But you cannot rush the process. You cannot force the hand of God. When you plant a seed in the ground, it does not spring up overnight. It takes time. It takes patience. The roots must go deep before the plant can grow tall. And just like that seed, God is preparing you. He is working in ways you cannot see. You may not understand what He is doing right now, but trust in Him, for He is always working behind the scenes. Think about Abraham. God gave him a promise that he would be the father of many nations. But years passed and still no child came. Can you imagine how he felt? The doubt that crept into his heart. He probably wondered if he had heard God correctly. He probably looked at his circumstances and thought, I am too old. My wife is too old. Maybe God has forgotten about me. But God had not forgotten. God was preparing something greater than Abraham could imagine. And at the appointed time, Isaac was born just as God had promised. What about Joseph? God gave him a dream that he would be a ruler. But instead of being lifted up, he was thrown down, betrayed by his own brothers, sold into slavery, falsely accused, thrown into prison. Years passed, and his dream must have seemed impossible, but God had not forgotten. At the right time, He lifted Joseph up. He placed him in a position of power, and Joseph could look back and say, what they meant for evil, God used for good. My friends, I want you to hear me today. Just because it has not happened yet does not mean it will not happen. Just because you do not see the answer does not mean the answer is not coming. God's timing is not our timing. His ways are higher than our ways. He sees the end from the beginning. He knows what is best for you. Some of you are waiting for a breakthrough. You have been praying for healing. You have been asking God for restoration. You have been believing for a miracle. But the wait is long. The nights feel endless. And the enemy whispers in your ear, God has forgotten you. But I am here to tell you, the devil is a liar. God has not forgotten you. He sees you. He knows your pain. He hears your prayers. And He is working even when you cannot see it. Look at the story of Lazarus. Mary and Martha sent word to Jesus that their brother was sick. They expected Him to come right away. They thought He would arrive in time to heal him, but Jesus delayed, and Lazarus died. Imagine how Mary and Martha felt. They must have thought, if only Jesus had come sooner, our brother would still be alive. But Jesus had a greater plan. When He finally arrived, He did not just heal Lazarus. He raised him from the dead. He showed His power in a way they never expected. Sometimes God delays because He wants to do something greater than what you are asking for. You may be asking for healing, but He wants to bring full restoration. You may be asking for a job, but he wants to give you a purpose. You may be asking for a relationship, but he wants to give you a ministry. Do not settle for less than what God has in store for you. Wait on his timing. Trust in his plan. The Bible tells us in Isaiah 40:31, but those who wait upon the Lord shall renew their strength. They shall mount up with wings like eagles. They shall run and not be weary. They shall walk and not faint. When you wait on the Lord, he strengthens you. He prepares you. He equips you for what is ahead. The waiting season is not wasted. It is where God molds you. It is where he shapes your character. It is where he builds your faith. Think of David. He was anointed as king when he was just a boy, but he did not take the throne right away. He had to wait. He had to go through trials. He had to flee from Saul. He had to endure hardship. But in that waiting, God was preparing him. He was teaching him to trust. He was shaping him into the man who would be called a man after God's own heart. Waiting is never easy, but it is always worth it. God is not making you wait to punish you. He is making you wait to prepare you. He is aligning things in your favor. He is setting the stage for something greater than you can imagine. And when the time is right, when you are ready, when his purpose is fulfilled, he will move. He will open the doors that no man can shut. He will bring the breakthrough you have been praying for. So do not grow weary. Do not give up. Keep trusting. Keep believing. Keep holding onto his promises. The enemy wants you to quit. He wants you to lose hope. But God is faithful. He has never failed, and he will not start now. Remember, God is never late. He is never too early. He is always on time. His timing is perfect. Trust in him. Wait on him. And when the answer comes, when the door opens, when the blessing arrives, you will look back and see that it was worth every moment of waiting. My friends, I want you to listen closely today because this message is for you. This is for the one who has been waiting for a breakthrough, for the one who has been crying out to God in the midnight hour, for the one who has been feeling like their prayers are bouncing off the ceiling. I want you to hear me when I say this. God has not forgotten you. He has not abandoned you. He has not ignored your prayers. He has not turned his face away from you. He is working. He is moving. He is orchestrating things in ways that you cannot see. I know what it feels like to wait. I know what it feels like to wonder if God is listening. I know what it feels like to watch others receive their blessings while you feel stuck in the same place. But I want to remind you of something today. God's delays are not his denials. Just because it hasn't happened yet does not mean it's not going to happen. Just because the door hasn't opened yet does not mean it's locked forever. Just because you don't see movement does not mean God isn't working. Think about Noah. God told him to build an ark because a flood was coming. But do you know how long it took for that flood to come? It took years, decades. Can you imagine how foolish Noah must have looked building a massive boat when there was no sign of rain? Can you imagine how many people must have laughed at him, ridiculed him, told him he was crazy? And yet Noah trusted God's timing. He kept building, he kept believing, and when the rain finally came, he and his family were saved. What if Noah had given up? What if he had said, I've been waiting too long. This must not be real. My friend, you might be in the middle of your waiting season right now. You might be looking around and wondering why nothing is happening. But I want to tell you today, keep building, keep trusting, keep waiting, because when the time is right, God will do what he said he would do. There is something about waiting that tests our faith like nothing else. When everything is going well, it's easy to trust God. When the doors are opening and the blessings are flowing, it's easy to say, God is good. But what about when you have to wait? What about when the answer doesn't come right away? What about when you pray and it feels like heaven is silent? That is when real faith is tested. The Bible tells us about a man named Job. Job was a righteous man. He loved God. He served him with all his heart. And yet one day he lost everything. His wealth, his health, his children, everything was taken from him. And in his pain, in his sorrow, he cried out to God. He didn't understand why he had to suffer. He didn't know why he had to endure such loss. But do you know what Job said? He said, though he slay me, yet will I trust him. My friends, that is faith, that is trust. Job didn't know how long his suffering would last. He didn't know when God would restore him, but he held on to his faith. And because he waited, because he trusted, because he refused to let go of God, in the end, God restored him with twice as much as he had before. You may be in a season right now where everything seems to be falling apart. You may be in a season where nothing is making sense. But I want you to do what Job did. I want you to hold on. I want you to trust. I want you to keep believing, because God is not finished with your story. There are some of you listening today who feel like God has forgotten you. You feel like he has passed you by. You feel like your prayers are not being heard. But let me tell you something. God is always on time. He knows exactly what you need and when you need it. Think about the story of Hannah. She wanted a child more than anything. She prayed, she wept, she cried out to God, and for years she waited. For years she wondered when her time would come, and then one day, in the right season, at the right time, God answered her prayer, and she gave birth to a son, Samuel, who became one of the greatest prophets in Israel's history. What if Hannah had given up? What if she had stopped praying? What if she had stopped believing? My friends, your answer is coming. Your breakthrough is coming. Your blessing is on the way. But you have to trust in God's timing. So many of us try to rush God. We think that if he doesn't move fast enough, we have to take matters into our own hands. But whenever we try to force something before it's time, we end up in trouble. Look at Sarah and Abraham. God promised them a son, but when the waiting became too hard, Sarah decided to take things into her own hands. She told Abraham to have a child with her servant Hagar. And while that decision brought temporary satisfaction, it also brought long-term consequences. If they had only waited on God's timing, they would have seen that his plan was perfect all along. Some of you are trying to force doors open that God is keeping shut for a reason. Some of you are trying to make things happen in your own strength instead of trusting in God's plan. But let me remind you today, when God is in it, you won't have to force it. When it's God's time, the doors will open on their own. When it's God's time, everything will fall into place. I know waiting is hard. I know it can feel like nothing is happening, but what if I told you that God is doing more in your waiting season than you can imagine? What if I told you that he is using this time to strengthen you, to prepare you, to position you for what's coming next? Think about the butterfly. Before it can fly, it has to go through a process. It starts as a caterpillar, crawling on the ground. Then it enters the cocoon, a dark and lonely place. But inside that cocoon, something is happening. It may not look like anything is changing on the outside, but transformation is taking place on the inside. And then at the right time and the right season, The butterfly emerges ready to soar. That is what God is doing in your life right now. You may feel like nothing is happening. You may feel like you are stuck. But God is working in ways you cannot see. He is preparing you for something greater. And when the time is right, He will bring you into the promise He has for you. My friends, do not lose heart. Do not give up. Do not stop believing. Your waiting is not in vain. Your prayers are not in vain. Your faith is not in vain. God is faithful. He is true to His word. He has never failed, and He will not start now. Hold on to His promises. Stand firm in your faith. Keep trusting, keep believing, and keep waiting. Because when the time is right, when the season has come, when everything is in place, God will move in a way that will leave you in awe. Your time is coming. Your blessing is coming. Your breakthrough is on the way. Trust in God's perfect timing. My friends, listen to me today, because I believe God is speaking to someone right now. You have been in a waiting season for so long, and you are tired. You are weary. You have been praying, fasting, believing, but still nothing seems to be moving. You have been faithful, but you are asking, Lord, how much longer? You have been holding on, but your strength is running low. But I want you to hear this. God sees you. He knows exactly where you are, and He has not forgotten you. The enemy wants you to believe that your waiting is wasted. He wants you to believe that nothing is happening, that God has overlooked you, that He has chosen to bless others but not you. But the devil is a liar. Your waiting is not wasted. Your waiting is your preparation. Your waiting is where God is doing the deep work inside of you. Your waiting is where He is molding you, refining you, strengthening you for what is coming next. Some of you are in a waiting season because God is protecting you. You are asking for something, but He knows that if He gives it to you too soon, it will destroy you. He knows that if He gives you that job, that relationship, that promotion before you are ready, it will be more than you can handle. And because He loves you, He is saying, wait. Because He cares for you, He is saying, trust me. Because He knows the future, He is saying, my child, I have something better. Think about David. He was anointed as king while he was still a shepherd boy. But he did not take the throne immediately. He had to wait. He had to go through battles. He had to face giants. He had to run from Saul. He had to endure hardship. But all of it was preparing him. Every moment of waiting was making him into the man who would be called a man after God's own heart. Every trial was teaching him to trust in God. Every delay was building his character. And when the time was right, God placed him on the throne. What if David had given up? What if he had said, God, this is taking too long, I quit? My friend, do not quit. Do not walk away from your promise just because the road is long. God's timing is not your timing, but His timing is always perfect. Some of you are waiting for healing. You have prayed, you have believed, and you have not seen the answer yet. But let me remind you of something. Delay does not mean denial. Just because it has not happened yet does not mean it is not coming. God is the same yesterday, today, and forever. The same God who healed the blind, who made the lame walk, who raised the dead, is the same God who is working in your life right now. Do not stop believing. Do not stop praying. Do not stop trusting. Your healing is coming in His perfect time. Some of you are waiting for restoration. Maybe you have been praying for your marriage. Maybe you've been believing for a prodigal son or daughter to come home, and the wait is hard. The nights are long. The burden feels heavy. But I want you to hear me. God is working even when you cannot see it. He is softening hearts. He is changing minds. He is doing things behind the scenes that you do not even know about. Keep standing in faith. Keep declaring his promises. Keep believing that what God started, he will finish. I think about Joseph. God gave him a dream, but before that dream came to pass, he was betrayed by his brothers, thrown into a pit, sold into slavery, falsely accused, thrown into prison. Can you imagine how he must have felt? Can you imagine the nights he spent wondering, God, where are you? Why is this happening to me? Did I hear you wrong? But God had not abandoned Joseph. He was positioning him. He was preparing him. And in one moment, everything changed. In one day, Joseph went from the prison to the palace. That is the power of God's timing. That is why you must wait on him, because when he moves suddenly. When he acts swiftly. When the moment is right, everything will come together in a way that will leave you in awe. Some of you are trying to force things before their time. You are trying to rush what God is asking you to wait for. You are knocking on doors that God has intentionally kept shut. But hear me, when it is God's time, you will not have to force it. The door will open on its own. The opportunity will come naturally. The blessing will flow easily, and you will know that it was the Lord who did it. Look at Moses. God called him to lead the Israelites out of Egypt, but Moses tried to do it in his own strength. He saw an Egyptian beating a Hebrew, and in his anger, he killed the Egyptian, thinking he was helping God's plan. But that decision cost him 40 years in the wilderness. Why? Because he moved before it was time, because he tried to force what only God could do. How many of us have made the same mistake? How many of us have stepped ahead of God, thinking we knew best, only to end up in a wilderness season because we refused to wait? My friend, do not make that mistake. Trust God's timing. He knows what he is doing. He sees what you cannot see. And when he says wait, it is because he has something far greater in store. Some of you are in a season where nothing makes sense. You are looking around and everything seems to be going wrong. You do not understand why doors are closing. You do not understand why people are walking away. But what if I told you that God is removing the things that would hinder your destiny? What if I told you that he is closing the wrong doors so that he can open the right one? What if I told you that he is allowing certain people to leave your life because they cannot go where he is taking you? God's timing is not just about waiting for the right things. It is also about being willing to let go of the wrong things. It is about surrender. It is about saying, Lord, not my will, but yours be done. It is about trusting that he knows what is best for you, even when it does not make sense. I know it is hard. I know the waiting is painful, but let me tell you something. Your faith is being strengthened in the waiting. Your trust in God is being deepened. Your relationship with him is growing. The waiting is not wasted. The waiting is where you learn to depend on him like never before. Think about Jesus. He waited 30 years before he started his ministry. For 30 years, he prepared. For 30 years, he stayed in his Father's will. And then at the right time, in the right season, he stepped into his purpose. What if he had rushed it? What if he had said, I cannot wait, I need to start now? No, he trusted his Father's timing. And because he waited, he walked in the fullness of his calling. My friend, your time is coming. Your season is coming. Your breakthrough is coming. But do not rush it. Do not step ahead of God. Do not let impatience rob you of what he has prepared for you. You may be waiting for something big. You may be believing for something that seems impossible. But I want to tell you today, hold on. Keep the faith. Stand firm. God is faithful. He has never failed, and he will not fail you now. Every great man and woman of God had to wait. Every promise in Scripture was fulfilled in God's perfect time. And if he did it for them, he will do it for you. He is the same God. He is the same yesterday, today, and forever. So keep trusting, keep believing, keep waiting, because when the time is right, when God's perfect plan unfolds, you will see that the wait was worth it. You will see that he was working all along, and you will know beyond a shadow of a doubt that he is faithful. My dear friends, I know the waiting can feel unbearable at times. I know there are moments when you feel like giving up, when the silence of God seems louder than anything else in your life. But let me tell you, God is never truly silent. He is always speaking, always working, always orchestrating things in ways beyond our understanding. Even when you cannot hear him, even when you cannot see him, he is there. He is preparing something greater than you could ever imagine. Look at the story of Lazarus. Mary and Martha sent word to Jesus that their brother was sick. They expected him to come immediately. They expected an instant miracle, but Jesus waited. He delayed. And in that delay, Lazarus died. Can you imagine their heartbreak? Can you imagine the questions they must have had? Lord, if you had been here, our brother would not have died. But what they did not realize was that Jesus had a greater plan. He was not just going to heal Lazarus, he was going to raise him from the dead. What they thought was a delay was actually a setup for a greater miracle. That is what God is doing in your life. You may feel like time is running out. You may feel like the situation is dead. But God specializes in resurrection power. He specializes in bringing things back to life. He specializes in making the impossible possible. If he is making you wait, it is because he is preparing something even greater than what you asked for. Sometimes the reason God makes us wait is because he wants us to know that the blessing did not come from our own strength. He wants us to know that it was not by our own power, our own wisdom, or our own efforts, but by his hand alone. Because when he moves, there will be no doubt that it was him. When he answers, there will be no question that it was his doing. When the blessing comes, you will look back and say, if it had not been for the Lord, I would not be here. So, my friend, do not lose heart. Do not let discouragement take root in your spirit. Keep trusting, keep believing, keep holding on, because when the time is right, God will move in such a way that will leave you in awe. He is never early, never late. He is always right on time. Keep the faith, for your season of breakthrough is closer than you think. My friends, as we come to the end of this message, I want you to hold on to this truth. God's timing is perfect. You may not understand it now. You may not see the full picture. You may be wrestling with doubt, frustration, or even sorrow. But I want you to know that God has not abandoned you. He is not ignoring you. He is not withholding his blessings from you out of cruelty. No. He is preparing you. He is positioning you. He is working in ways beyond your comprehension. The waiting season is not wasted. It is a time of growth, of refinement, of drawing closer to God. It is in the waiting that our faith is strengthened. It is in the waiting that we learn to trust him, not for what he can do, but for who he is. And when the time is right, he will fulfill every promise. He will open the right doors. He will make a way where there seems to be no way. And you will see that his plan was greater than anything you could have imagined. So do not give up. Do not lose heart. Keep pressing forward. Keep believing. Keep trusting in his perfect timing, because the God who made the heavens and the earth, the God who set the stars in place, the God who knows the end from the beginning, he is the same God who holds your life in his hands, and he will bring his promises to pass in your life at just the right moment. Wait on the Lord. Trust in him. And in due time, you will see the fullness of his glory unfold in your life. Amen.